started to look at some of the promises that God was continuing to reveal to Abram. And some of the doubt that Abram probably had, still has, as we're kind of going to see today. God kind of taking him out and showed him all these things, and he reiterates the threefold promise that he talked to Abraham, or I guess Abram, about. Land, prosperity, and blessings. And he's taking him through chapters 11 and 12, and a little bit of 13. We saw him taking him through the land that he was going to show to give to them. And the blessings as well, families, all the families of the earth be blessed. And Abraham was, Abram, was realizing some of that as well. God was blessing him with stuff, or what's called stuff, physical things that the wealth had increased, and he was realizing some of that as well. And we saw in verse chapter 15, God kind of continued to talk about this posterity, how he's going to make this great nation come from Abram. The problem with that statement, though, is what? A couple of things, right? Abram, first of all, is old. He's old, right? He's an old man. Secondly, he doesn't have any children. And the entire time that he's been married to Sarah, they've been trying to have children and not been able to. She's been barren. So when God shows up and tells him, Abram, you are going to make a great nation, and it hasn't happened yet, we can see why Abram has some reservations and some doubts. Okay? And he expressed some of those things to God as we saw last week. And God kind of again reiterates this promise. He takes him out at night and tells him to look up at the stars. And to be looking at the stars, this was a good week to look at the stars. I don't know if any of y'all got a chance to do that. It was a good week for it. This week coming is going to be a good week too. That you're going to be able to see Mars and Mercury this week. Just a lot of cool things going on there. But he takes him out, and I usually the girls go to bed fairly early, and I'm usually still up because I usually end up putting kids to sleep and falling asleep when I do that, and I'm up for another couple hours. Because once I nap a little bit, I'm up for a while. So I have been going out and outside messing around and doing a couple things, and I a couple times looked up at the stars, and it continued to reiterate the same things that God told Abraham, that he did the same thing. Abraham looked at the same stars I was looking at. God told him, I'm going to make this nation so that you can't count. Right? The stars that are here. It's just really, really awesome to see because God put all those things in place, right? And He put those stars there, and He actually has names for all of it. He's telling Abraham, if I was able to do that, I can make anything happen. Okay, to reiterate His promise to Abram. And that's what He did. He promises him there. And he went through verses 1 through 6, and He tells him all those things that He's going to do, and continues to reveal some stuff about Himself to Abraham and to us as well. This is all important interest in us. He is aware of our fears, our concerns, our worries. He knows those things. He told Abraham in verse 1 that I know the worries, the concerns, the doubts that you have, but you need to remember that I am your shield. Right? I'm the guy in charge. I'm your protector. He continues to assure Abraham about the things of who God is. And he continues also, God is omnipotent, He's all powerful, He's omniscient, He knows everything, He's ultimately sovereign. We've just seen in these 14 chapters the plan that was set in place, and we're able to kind of trace through scriptures how this plan worked. Again, we were talking about the divided kingdoms, a year ago, whatever it was, and how God set the plan up in Genesis about this heir and how He kept it all the way through. We can see the sovereignty of God. We know even now the master plan is still fully in effect, and He's the master in charge of it. And with that sovereignty means He has ultimate wisdom, right? Because He already knows all these things that are kind of going to happen. So that's what God was revealing Himself to Abram last week. He talked about the promises. And again, just assuring him. Now, it was really interesting, I thought, that we saw Abram here on a couple of different occasions now that God has taken care of him. And we see even now, because even Abram, one of the dudes, right, one of the main guys of faith, had some doubts here, had some worries. And he expresses those things to God. And we see in this instance, God not kind of coming down on him and saying, you big dumb-dumb, how do you not know? Of course, I done this before, of course I'm going to do it again. We actually see God kind of just encouraging him. And because Abraham's down and out, he has some anxiety, probably has some things going on, and he's depressed and worried about some stuff, and God kind of comes in and doesn't take him to the woodshed, but kind of takes him in and just gives him some encouragement. Because God, again, knows exactly what Abram needs at this point. Now, does Abram later on a couple times need his hind end with a little bit? Yes. Does God do that? Yes. Okay, so God, again, in his sovereignty and his wisdom, knows what he needs and makes sure he has it. Okay? Which is what we see in chapter 15. Which brings us to chapter 16 and 17. Okay? So, God has just promised Abraham a nation and promised him an heir. And told him that he would have a son and children and this great nation, and took him out and showed him the stars, and we've seen this huge, all of chapter 15, it's just been this awesome display of the compassion and the power of God. Okay, that's what the entirety of chapter 15, this is a really feel-good moment here for Abraham in chapter 15. At chapter 14, at the beginning of it, things were a little bit, I don't know, Lot gets captured, there's this big, huge battle, Abraham and his 300 and some mighty men go and take over, and God is taking care of them, and Abraham's kind of worried about these people coming back, and we're kind of seeing the low point, then we get to chapter 15, and there's just this huge, just bubbly feeling about chapter 15. Then we get to chapter 16, okay? And the focus here on God's communication to Abraham has largely been up to this point, the promise of land, accompanied with this lesser promise of these heirs, this family as well. Chapter 16 kind of focuses more on the promise of heir than it does kind of the blessings and kind of everything else that goes with it. Okay? So as we get to the beginning of chapter 16, what we see is that Abraham has just been told these things. He's just been given these reassurances, and I'm sure as any good married couple is full of just great communication. But Abraham was kind of told Sarah this event. This would have been an event that took place in Abraham's life, right? This would have been God had just reassured to him and kind of in the way that he had done. Sarah, though, has some other ideas. Okay, let's first 3 verses of chapter 16. Now Sarah, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarah said to Abraham, Behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarah. And Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. So we've had this huge, chapter 15 just feels great. We get done talking about it, it just feels good. And then we get to chapter 16, and we see man bowing, getting in the way of the plan of God, and trying to do things their own way. Sarah here, nowhere near as trusting as Abram of God and the promise that God had gave him of bearing him a son. So she comes up with this idea that since she is unable to bear children, that she's going to use Abram and her handmaid as surrogates, and make this surrogate arrangement with her servant Hagar, and have children that way. Okay? Which surrogates and all those things, we see those things happening a lot now. But in this instance, in this case, God promised them something very specifically. And Abram had told Sarah what God had just showed him. And then it's been some time, whatever it was, and they've been living there in the land of Canaan now for 10 years. And we don't know exactly how long it's been since God has promised Abram to this. We don't really see the exact amount of time, but it's probably sometime probably past, and they're still bearing no children. So Sarah comes up with the idea that Abram and Hagar should get married and have children, and that's how they would start Abram's family. And when Sarah brought this plan to Abram, right, this was not something that she just harebrained, cockamamie idea that she just came up with one night. This was a plan that probably had been festering now in her mind for quite some time. And when she brought this plan to Abram, Abram's response should have been, no. No. Right? All that. No. And telling Sarah that needs to continue to trust God. Abram needs to continue to trust God, but that is not what Abram does. Okay? Now, we think here, it's probably been some time and it's not happening, and they're concerned and worried that they're not getting any younger, that it's getting older and older and older, and how this more physically impossible this is becoming to be for Sarah and Abram to have children together. So we can see where the doubt has creeped in. We get it, right? We understand. We can fathom Abraham and Sarah having this conversation. And we said this was going to happen. It's been 4 or 5 years now, and it's not happening yet. And I'm just physically, this can't happen anymore. I don't understand why God is not allowing this to happen. Maybe God wants us to do this. I'm sure that's the conversation Abraham and Sarah had. Maybe God meant that He really wanted us to do this. So we see now, after the good feelings of chapter 15, we kind of see some of this doubt and some of this stuff kind of coming in around. And Sarah, based on her own plan, shows what about that, or shows what about how she felt about God's plan. The opposite, right? She thought God's actions of restraining her from bearing children and His plans for her to have children were contradictory to each other. So is he doubting? Is he Sarah doubting God and what God promised them that hadn't happened for so many years? So Sarah thought that she needed to take matters into her own hands. If she could get a legal heir in the legal sense for Abraham through Hagar, then the fact that she was been barren would no longer then become an issue for Abraham. She's trying to fix things here. She's trying to fix things. But what she doesn't realize is that the altering effects and problems that this seemingly simple plan, the effects it was going to have for generations and generations and generations to come. Now, verse 3, we saw that she sends, Abram still sends her handmaiden, Hagar, to marry Abram. Verse 4, when he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarah said to Abram, my wrong be upon me. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. And the Lord judged between me and thee. But Abram said unto Sarah, behold, thy maid is thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth her. And when Sarah dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. Okay? Now, Sarah's plan works. It works just exactly as she planned that it would work. Hagar becomes pregnant and bears a child to Abraham. And when Hagar has this child and Sarah sees her go through the pregnancy and have the child, what is the response of Sarah? What's the response here? They don't like each other anymore, right? Neither one of these women are happy. Hagar's happy with babies here, obviously, but these two are probably very, very close, right? Hagar was Sarah's main servant, probably spent tons and tons of time with her, dealt with her, was with her through miscarriages, and could have very well been with her through the pain of not being able to bear children, with her through a lot of times. These women, this wasn't just some random service she gave Abraham. This was a close friend, personal confidant, right? They're very, almost like sisters, okay? Would have been very, 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 very close. And when this event happens and Hagar becomes pregnant, and has this child, we see now conflict, you see pain, you see Sarah's response of not being appreciative or not being nearly as happy as she thought she would be when Hagar had this baby or became pregnant. And so you see this huge division between these probably two really good friends. And because of that, she treats Hagar harshly. And Sarah is very much at fault here for kind of coming up with this plan and treating her the way that she did. But she's not the only one that's at fault here. Abram allowed this whole thing to happen. And when Hagar has this baby and becomes pregnant, he allows Sarah to treat her in the way that she treated her. And he tells Sarah, honey, do whatever you want to. I understand. He doesn't really kind of come in and say, we've messed up. We shouldn't have done this. We never really see that here from Abram here in first little bit. He kind of allows the vengeance and the spite and the bitterness that Sarah has. It kind of just allows them happy life, essentially. Just let her do whatever she wants to. Maybe she'll leave me alone. It's kind of what we see from Abram here. So Sarah treats Hagar harshly and forces her to retreat into the wilderness and to leave, where she's at. See verse 7 here. After verse 6, she flees. And in verse 7, then the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way of Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, whence camest thou? And whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarah. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered before thy multitude. So we see Hagar retreating into the wilderness, and we see another occasion here in which God demonstrates his omniscience. Now, this angel of the Lord that shows up in verse 7 is most likely a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. Okay? There's a name for it. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But a pre-incarnate version of Christ here. And actually, if you look at verse 13, and she called the name of the Lord, and that spake unto her, thou God seest me, for she said, have I also here. She actually Hagar calls this angel of God in verse 13. This is probably a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ, showing up again and demonstrating the omniscience of God here. It appears unto Hagar and uses some language here that is very reminiscent to some of the same things that Abraham had been communicated to. Hagar learned from the angel of the Lord here that her descendant as well would be innumerable, right? There would be a large amount of people that would come from her descendant as well. And as we go on and look at verse 11, and the angel of the Lord shall say unto her, behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. So God shows up and tells her that they're going to have any descendants from her, gives her the name for her son Ishmael, which means God hears. That's what Ishmael means. And that learned that would be the son. And we also see that in verse 12 that Ishmael will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. So we see also that not only would a great multitude come from Ishmael, we also see here that Ishmael would be an individualistic, a violent individual who would be bent on conflict. Okay, it's all he was going to do, to be bent on conflict. And this prophecy here essentially communicates the promise for Abram to be a blessing to all people that we saw over in chapter 15. That was not going to come from Ishmael. Okay? That another son was going to have to fulfill the promise of Abraham being a blessing to all people. Alright? So we get to verse 13. She called the name of the Lord, and it spake unto her, thou God seest me, for she said, have I also here looked after him that seeth me? So Hagar describes God in her encounter with the angel of the Lord as the God who sees, the God who understands, and the God who sees. Okay, so Hagar's identification here of God as the God who sees is went back to the actual Hebrew, her saying that thou God seest me, that's a Hebrew pun, right? It doesn't really, they don't really recognize the way that's written in the English language. And if you take it in the Hebrew and translate it as is, it's actually the God who sees me, which is better and matches a little more with what actually happened here. Hey, God shows up to Hagar and sees her, understands her concern and her worry, and we don't see her telling him that anywhere, right? We don't actually see her expressing that worry. He just already knows that, right? So the God who sees me is a little better translation for it, because it matches more what happens. And you can also turn it to the God that I see, which also matches Hagar's, the explanation of kind of going on there too. Both can communicate very important truths. That's the reason I'm kind of getting into all this. The first understanding communicates that God sees and cares for people. Right? God sees me. He sees people, cares for them. He saw the need, saw the concern, saw the worry, and he made sure he took care of it. The second understanding, the second point there is that Hagar experienced, I see God. She actually experienced some form of physical revelation from God. Right? He shows up, tells her about Ishmael, tells her what he's going to be, how he's going to be, what's going to happen. So she was able to see him. Okay? God knowledge is highlighted through this account. The account also develops through a negative example, a proper understanding of belief and trust. Okay? Truly trusting God means being completely dependent on Him to fulfill His purposes. It means there's no place for human involvement in God's plan. Sarah clearly acted here, though, without consulting God, and her actions bring disruptive and destructive results. Okay? So let's jump into chapter 17. And God's knowledge communicated to Abraham. And what we're going to see are the effects here, essentially, of this mistake. Okay? Of this intervening of Sarah and Abraham into God's plan. So, chapter 17. 13 years here after the account of Hagar and Ishmael, which we had in chapter 16, God resumes communication with Abraham. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the mighty God, walk before me and be thou perfect. 13 years from chapter 16 to chapter 17, and God does not speak to Abram. Okay? Silent treatment, right? Gives him nothing for 13 years. Then shows up when he's 99. And tells him to walk with him. I am the Almighty God, walk before me and be thou perfect. So the subtle message here between Abram's age and the name God called himself. Excuse me. What's the message here? Or the subtle relationship between Abram's age and the name that God called himself? What's the reason? We look at verse 1 and we read it. Why is it written that way?
Because he 13 years ago thought something was impossible, and God saying, no, I'm mightier than your age.
Absolutely. Right, that's it. So we see Abram's age of being 99, which even after the flood, even there's this can't happen. Can't have no babies at 99. I mean, it's just not going to work. All right? It's not going to happen. But we see God showing up that, writing down here that Abram's 99 years old, so we know exactly how old this man is. And then God calling himself the Almighty One again shows the possibility from this impossibility. Right? God is showing His power here. Introducing Himself as the Almighty God, pointing out that He could still give Abram an heir because He's God. That's what God does. Okay? Because we know that we get down later in this passage here, right around verse 16 or 17, what does Abram and Sarah do when God shows up and tells them to have a baby? They laugh, right? They kind of laugh about this whole situation. So, God knew Abraham had to learn still yet just how powerful he was. Okay? And God may have come to mean more to Abraham after Isaac's birth than it did kind of the immediate thing going on here. So let's read through chapter 17, and let's read the first 8 verses here. Verse 2, and I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thou shalt be named Abraham. I'm so glad that happened. Keep calling him Abraham. For the father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee, and their greatness, for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee, and unto thy seed after the land wherein thou art a stranger. All the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, I will be their God. So, verses 1 through 8, God one more time shows up to Abraham, reaffirms his promises, gives him the blessings, and conditions Abraham's enjoyment of the covenant promises here with the need to walk blamelessly before him. Okay? There's now tells him he's going to give him these promises, but gives him the condition as well that he needs to be walking blameless. We see verse 1, walk before me and be thou perfect. Okay? So giving him, I will be faithful to you as long as you are faithful to me. Now the condition is not a change to the ultimate unconditional nature of the covenant with Abraham, but it does mean that total obedience is necessary for Abraham to benefit from the promises. Right? We see God doing this in the exact same manner when he talked to Solomon in 1 Kings, when he talks to Hezekiah in 2 Kings. We don't have time to flip over there right this morning, but he uses the same, if you're faithful, I'll be faithful. If you're faithful, I'll be faithful. This kind of idea to show his promises, right? So there's a change here. It seems to have taken place some way in Abram. His history from this point onward, as we're going to continue to see, is overwhelmingly positive. He commits to obedience, and we'll see, especially later on, with talking about the promise of giving up his son. We'll talk about that later on. But we see now, I don't call him a new man, we see him being much more obedient and much more completely dependent on God from this account moving forward. Okay? God tells Abraham again, verses 4 through 8, he's going to make him his nation, he's going to be an exalted father. The name Abraham gets changed because Abraham actually means father of a multitude. And he continues to tell Abraham that many nations were going to descend from him, and so on and so forth. Right? So this new covenant communicated in passages that we see here, we see in 1 Kings again, 2 Kings, we see it over in Jeremiah as well, is the ultimate means that allows Israel to perfectly obey God. And as long as they are perfectly obeying God, they are going to enjoy the unconditional benefits of the covenant forever. Okay? That's what this does. That's what these verses here in chapter 17, the Abrahamic covenant, that's what it does. It allows Israel to perfectly obey God and enjoy the blessings of the unconditional covenant forever. Right? So, God tells him going to be a father of all these people down through verse 8. We get down to verse 9. And God said to Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant. Therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generation. This is my covenant which ye shall keep between me and you, and thy seed after thee. Every man child among you shall be circumcised. So God establishes circumcision here as a sign of the covenant between God and Abraham, and then all of his descendants going forward. The sign is a reminder here of the promises that God made. Failure to participate in this sign of the covenant means that Abraham's descendants would not realize the benefits of the covenant. Just as God had communicated to Abraham, the enjoyment of the covenant depended again upon his obedience. Alright? So, to enjoyment of the covenant depended on circumcision. Failure to keep this sign of the covenant did not negate the unconditional promises made to Abraham. It just temporarily prevented the full benefit of them. Okay? Let me say that again. The failure to keep this didn't negate it, it just didn't allow them to be realized fully, to their full potential. Yes, does that make sense? I want to make sure. Okay, good. Excellent. Alright, so God continues here to talk to Abraham about the promise. So let's jump down to verse 15. So verses 12, 13, 14 talks about the legalistic part here of being circumcised, uncircumcised. We jump down to verse 15. We'll see some of the limits here God puts on. And God said to Abraham, "As for Sarah thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. Sarah shall her name be, excuse me. And I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she will be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her." So he tells Abraham as well that now you're no longer call her Sarah, I'm call her Sarah, because I'm going to make a nation come from her, your wife, Sarah, who's 10 years younger than Abraham, would have been 89. Okay? And had been through menopause, there would have been no physical way for her to have a baby. We'll just call it that's the truth. I'm not physically impossible for that to happen. Okay? Didn't have any more eggs or anything to be fertilized. There was no physical possible way for Sarah to have a baby. Alright? So he tells that to Abraham that you're going to have a son that's going to come from Sarah, and we see Abraham in verse 17 do what? Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed, and he said in his heart, "Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old, and Sarah, and that is 90 years old, barren?" And Abraham said unto God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee." And God said, "Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him." So God tells Abraham what's going to happen. And Abraham, who's just been told, as long as you are faithful, I will be faithful. Do these things, and I will do these things. I'll give you a son, and Abraham's okay with it. All right, God will do it however you will. And he says, "Well, we're going to have it from Sarah." And Abraham laughs in the face of God. Abraham found the notion of having a child by Sarah laughable. Now, he kept his notions to himself, right? He says into his heart, to himself, he says, "Okay, God, I'm sure that's going to work. How's that going to happen?" And though his laugh was apparently audible, it was actually a possibility that Abraham's laugh is what caused him to fall on his face. He may have been laughing so hard that he fell over when he heard God tell him that Sarah was going to have a wife. Thought to himself, no way that's going to happen. But God, of course, knew exactly what Abraham was thinking, and was not surprised when Abraham said, "Okay, take Ishmael. Got a son. Let's take Ishmael. He can fit the role of being my heir." Now, I like the way verses 19 and 20 are written. And God said, "Sarah, thou shalt bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant." So after verse 18, Abraham looks at God, essentially, not physically, looks at God and says, "Well, Sarah can't really, this is not going to work. Why not take Ishmael and let him be the heir?" And we see Abraham again trying to use his own plan and the plan of God. Right? In verse 19, God probably, if we looks over at Ishmael, looks back at Abraham and says, "And God said, Sarah thy wife, bear thee a son indeed. You're going to call him Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him, the everlasting covenant." So he looks at Abraham and maybe a little sterner says, "Sarah's going to have a baby. You're going to name him Isaac, and he's the one I'm going to have the covenant through." And for Ishmael, verse 20, "I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee, and as this set time in the next year. And he left off talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with money, every male among Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of the foreskin. And the selfsame day, as God had said unto him, and Abraham was 90 years old and 9, and he circumcised in the flesh his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old, and he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son, and all the men of his house born in the house of bought with money, the strangers were circumcised with him. So God's response here to Abraham's suggestion was a definite no. No, I'm going to do it with Isaac. But for Ishmael, I'm going to make sure he is taken care of as well, right? I'm going to have a great nation and things coming from him as well. God even went on to talk about the covenant. He goes on and mentions his ability to open Sarah's womb. She could bear a child in her old age. He goes on and talks about the covenant with Isaac and his descendants. God talked about Abraham as a grandfather and a great-grandfather. While Abraham was struggling with the idea of fathering a child in his old age, God also tells Abraham that he's not going to abandon his son Ishmael, but would make him fruitful and cause him to become a great nation. And 12 of the sons of Ishmael would become princes. The fact that Ishmael is Abraham's son is still a reason for the blessing. Right? Ishmael certainly didn't do anything to earn special blessings from God. However, God's covenant is not with Ishmael. His covenant is going to be established with Isaac. God uses the word establish here because he's already made the covenant with Abraham. God's covenant with Abraham remains the same with Isaac, Jacob, and then the rest of the nation. It's a set time now. God gives Abraham a set time that this is going to happen within the next year, and gives Abraham some encouragement to let him know that within a year he's going to have a son. So Abraham responds by immediately obeying God and circumcising all the men that were in his household. Okay? I've got just a couple of minutes. Let's talk about Ishmael for just a second. It's probably going to pop up later on. But Ishmael, if you go back and you begin to trace these 12 princes and trace Ishmael and kind of go back through his family lineage, the religion of Islam considers Ishmael to be a father of Muhammad. Okay? And if you look in the Quran and the lineage of the Quran, they think that Ishmael is that Muhammad is a direct descendant from Ishmael. Okay? Later on, we're going to see that some of a promise in which there's going to be problems and some kind of things that are going to happen. There's going to be I forgot how I had written down exactly what it is. There's a promise that there's going to be strife with the people of Israel for so long, or off for whatever it is going to be. And the reason for that is because we saw that Ishmael was a violent man and was going to kind of do his own thing, and a great nation was going to come out of it. There's a whole bunch of articles that you can read that try to tie the nation of the entire Arabic nation, okay, tie the entire Arabic nation back to Ishmael. That Ishmael is the reason that we have people who are, the Muslims who are so violent and so bent on making sure that the world essentially bows to their will. Now, that came directly and entirely from the line of Ishmael. Okay? There's another whole bunch of articles that say that not all of the people of Arab descent are from Ishmael. Half of them are. It kind of gets a little bit convoluted as you kind of start reading some of this, but in the Quran it specifically states that Muhammad is a descendant of Ishmael. All right, so if we go back and look at the problems now that the religion of Muslim, the religion of Islam is causing the Jewish people, we go straight back to the Gaza Strip, to the Palestinians, who are 97.5% Muslim, okay? And they think they are entitled to everything that the Israelites are entitled to. And why do you think that is the case? Because Ishmael thinks that he should be entitled to those things because he is a son of the heir from Abraham. So you can see the conflict that is beginning to get set up here. And we we'll see some of the conflict here in Scripture as we can kind of continue to move through. But it all started because Sarah thought that her plan was better than God's plan. So if Sarah would have never given Hagar over to Abraham, Ishmael would have never been born, and more than likely the Muslims would have never even existed. So you can see now the reason of a small decision, right? That what Sarah did, if you go back and look during this time, what Sarah did was very common. Was taking one of the unable to bear children, they would have taken a handmaid and give to the husband, they would have married, so they would have an heir to continue on the family line. A very, very common thing that would have happened all the time during this time period. But God said, don't do it, right? I'm going to bring one from Sarah. Small decision, probably seemed like an insignificant decision at the time to Abraham and Sarah, but look at the ramifications that it had. Right? Because they weren't obedient to God. Okay? And we're going to continue, we'll get more into that a little bit more next week. I'll kind of show you some more things. Let's pray. I got to get finished up. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you again for the lesson, for the promise you had Abraham, for the things you are going to continue to teach him and continue to teach us as we continue to look through this. And the faithfulness, Lord, that you showed to Abraham, and then it's the things not being great, and then the faithfulness again that you showed to Abraham, and Abraham was just very, very faithful, and the promise of blessings that you have because of the Lord. As we continue to look at that, Lord, continue to study these things, and want it to be a constant reminder to us that our decisions that we make of our own accord, of our own involvement, will always have consequences, always have actions that will be repeated maybe later on in our lives we don't even see at the time. That's why it's so important, Lord, for us to be focused entirely and be completely dependent on you. And I pray that today as we see is a reminder to us. If Pastor Robinson comes in